Welcome to Beacon Bits. I'm your co-host, Serge Boudreau, and every episode I will be joined by my co-host, Yves Boudreau. We delve into the world of work from the employer and employee viewpoint. Kick back, relax, and let's talk work. Beacon Bits starts right now. Welcome to Beacon Bits. I'm Serge, and as always, joined by my co-host, Yves Boudreau. How's it going, Yves?
It's going well. Back to a normal week this week after a bit of a whirlwind of a week last week.
Yeah, tell me about that, because last week was CPHR Atlantic, and you were a keynote speaker. Did you screw it up, or was it okay?
No, I have to admit, I thought I did pretty good. I was pretty disciplined this time. My deck wasn't ready 2 hours before I went on stage, so I had a few days to kind of process what I was going to present. I was the opening keynote at 9:30 a.m., so that was a bit of a challenge because I'm not a high energy guy to begin with. So I actually got up at 6:45 a.m. and I went to the gym for 45 minutes to get the blood pumping and to get my coffee in, and I felt really good. Yeah, made people laugh, which is always a good sign. That's always a part of my approach, is not take life too seriously.
You told me it was an hour keynote. An hour? I've never done an hour speech. I don't know if I could do it.
Yeah, it's challenging, but it's crazy how time flies. When you're up on it. So I actually added a couple of videos into my deck to essentially give myself little breathers, but also just to break the flow for the audience too. But it flew by. Even though it was long, it didn't feel that long. Hopefully it didn't feel that long for the audience. I got a really nice note from Tina, the main person behind CPHR Atlantic this morning. Probably one of the nicest notes I've ever received as a thank you note. So very thoughtful.
And kudos to her, right? Because this is her first event. She is the CEO of CPHR New Brunswick. All the feedback that I've heard has been excellent. And you had some amazing speakers as well with Sarah McVaniel and Torrin Ellis.
Yeah, I'm fortunate. I've seen Torrin a few times over the last couple of years. He owned the stage as he went up. I took a few notes, actually. Every time I see other speakers, I try to learn from their approach a little bit, because it's not what I do for a living. But I always want to get better at everything that I do. So I definitely took a few notes from Torrin. I'm obviously not Torrin, so I can't replicate what he does. But it was a sold-out event, and I've only heard good feedback. Even in social, it's still pouring right now. It's been over a week since the event, and there's still people that are tagging each other and all that. It's also the first in-person one since the good old pandemic. I believe it's the most successful event for CPHR Atlantic in the history of it, is what I've been told. But
interesting. Well, I'm glad it went well, and it's always good for Career Beacon being the main sponsor. I think you got really good presence, so kudos to you guys.
Yeah, it was fun.
So let's jump into what's trending in the news. And I wanted to bring up something that I saw recently. We've all seen the open to work banner, and there's been some fighting on LinkedIn. Should you have that? Should you not have it? Recently, there was a lady that came out, and she's a graphic designer and built a desperate banner on LinkedIn. And it's got some random feedback. Some people like it, some people don't. But there is a very popular Twitter account or X account called The Random Recruiter, and he gave his perspective. A couple of things that he said is, even if you're desperate, you should not do that, because social proof is a real thing. So if you're desperate, that clearly means no one is hiring you. I get what she was doing, and I get what people are doing when they're putting desperate or something like that. I have empathy in the sense of it's really tough out there to find a job. It's challenging. You're applying to hundreds, if not thousands of jobs, and you're not hearing back. And you might feel that it might differentiate you or show a little bit of humility. But I think what happens is hiring managers see that, and they see the open to work, and they automatically think, no, I want to hire someone that's already working, that's not desperate, that didn't get laid off, which we know is unrealistic. When you saw this, what's your thoughts around the desperate banner on LinkedIn?
Yeah, I think I saw it 3 weeks ago, actually. One of my marketing friends on Facebook probably, or LinkedIn, posted it, and she thought it was great, but the comments were all similar to that feedback that you just shared, that it wasn't really sending the best signal. I don't know. part of me thinks like, I don't say whatever you need to do to stand out, but if it's helped someone get noticed. And I think a lot of people aren't getting noticed today, like even qualified people, like their resumes just get shot down through their automated ATS or HRS systems and don't even get any consideration. I feel conflicted like you. I don't think it's a great strategy, but I remember the same conversation around open to work was a big thing.
Well, what's your thoughts around open to work, like that banner?
I'm okay with it. Where I feel a bit awkward is if you're currently employed and you have an open to work. If I had anyone on my team that like had the open to work, I would want to have a conversation with that individual because
Yes.
obviously there's something that we're not providing or that person is not feeling. So that's the part I feel awkward is if you're currently employed, and I've seen those.
Can you imagine, say you're in sales and you're reaching out to clients and they looked at your LinkedIn profile and see open to work? How much confidence would they have in buying whatever you're selling?
I haven't seen a
Uh,
lot of it, but I do think the open to work is fine. I've seen a lot of people that were recently laid off, and as
hmm.
soon as they're laid off, they put open to work. And I think in that context, it makes sense. Some people get laid off not because they're not talented, like
Oh,
they get laid
100%.
off from purely cost cutting. I know Shopify had some massive layoffs, and a lot of people there have the open to work to make it a little easier, maybe. But there's also search functions for recruiters in LinkedIn so that you can actually start to target people that do have the open to work badge.
As a recruiter, especially if I had to fill roles quickly or in high demand, I would search on LinkedIn Recruiter with those that are open and looking for work instead of just randomly hitting everyone because your response rate is very low. I don't have an issue with the open to work banner. I am just a little bit nervous to where I'm sending the resume over to the hiring manager. They looked at their LinkedIn profile. The desperate would be a non-starter for
Yeah.
most of the hiring managers that I work. The open to work, I don't think recruiters look at it in a bad way, but I do think hiring managers look at it in a bad way because I think they have a sense of the market that is probably not real, right? Like they don't have a day-to-day understanding of how challenging it is out there to find a job.
I think it also depends on the type of role, like everything else. Like we
Yeah.
always say that if you're someone who is in an industry that has a high demand for those types of positions and you're putting yourself out as an open to work when you should essentially have recruiters flocking left and right, that's a bit of a red flag for me. But if you're putting yourself open to work when there's not a lot of opportunities in
Yeah.
whatever that you do for a career, like I think that's not necessarily a bad thing.
So I guess the advice that you would give in this particular case, if you're still working, don't use it.
Definitely don't use it if you're working. I don't know. There might be cases I'm not thinking of right now. Maybe you just don't care. You're just at the point where you just hate your job and like, you don't care if there's any repercussions from it. But I still don't think it's a great.
How
I don't
about we
think it's
use the
not
example of, say, you get laid off, but you're working until a certain time period?
sure.
I think that makes sense, but there's very rare circumstances. And I appreciate people being creative and trying to find a way to find a job. I just don't think the desperate sends the message that you're looking for. Not that it's an official LinkedIn
Yeah,
banner that you can put on. So let's make sure that's clear.
I don't
But
know.
Eve, what else is trending in the news?
Trending in the news. We've talked in the past around AI and the impact it's having in the world of work. So a lot of big announcements from our friend Elon. Everything from self-driving vans to robots to rocket ships that come back. So I was away, so I'm assuming you spent a bit more time looking at it. I'll let you inform everyone on this podcast what happened.
Lately, if we're reporting any news on Elon Musk, is he said something really stupid on X.
Yeah.
But this is not the case. And I'll tell you, I flip flop on Elon Musk all the time on how I feel about him. One way, you can't deny the innovations that he's brought to the world, like no one else. Like the only comparison is Steve Jobs in our lifetime. And I
Yep.
think this is even more substantial. But he had a massive week last week. First of all, you mentioned, did you see the rocket coming down and basically landing in these chopsticks that like caught it? I don't think we understand how massive that is. It was so impressive to watch. The second thing, he had a major Tesla event and he unveiled some pretty cool stuff. One of them is the Cyber Bus. I don't know if you saw, but it looked pretty cool. It's a
Yeah.
self-driving bus that is supposed to be released in 2026. So we're a couple of years away from it. Then he unveiled the cybercab. I don't know how you feel about this, Yves, but I think in 10 years, no one's actually driving. I think we're all in the self-driving vehicles. I see it coming.
I don't want that personally, but yes. I
What?
don't mind that for public transportation to some degree. Actually, I don't even know if that's a fair statement. I think sometimes I would like some self-driving. I've had some really bad cab rides over the years, but for me personally, yeah,
Nope, it's not. I'd be more
no,
than happy to sit and do some work. And you got to think about the majority of the population lives in major urban areas where this is completely going to make sense.
yeah,
Or maybe not, but I guess we'll see. At least something is coming, and I think it's pretty big. But the one thing that I wanted to talk about is he unveiled the Tesla's Optimus robot, which
yeah.
is give you some insights on it. It's going to cost around 20 to 30,000 to get your own. It's capable of doing almost any task a human can. He had demos of it showing like watering plants, picking up groceries, doing dishes. He feels this is going to be his biggest product of all time. Eventually, we're all going to own one. I got a iRobot vibe from it.
He's getting sued actually by the filmmakers behind iRobot because of the designs being so close to the.
They look exactly like it, but imagine that. What's your thoughts around that? Could it replace some jobs?
Think about the average household income today, and think about realistically how many people will be able to afford those robots. It's going to be a smaller percentage of the overall population, and it's going to have to be really like amazing for it to be worth that price tag. I think it's going to sell. There's no doubt about it. And like everything, the Cybertruck, is it a great truck? I have no idea, but people want one just for the prestige and being one of the first. So, how cool would it be to have that much disposable income that you can go, hey, I'm going to be one of the first ones to own a robot? Like you're
Well,
literally going to be the talk of the town.
think about it. Let's look at the personal use, then the commercial use of this.
Sure.
So, on the personal side, if I can get someone to do all my chores and say that robot has a lifespan of 5 years, that's like 3-4 grand a year to have someone do all the chores that you don't like doing, like your dishes, the
It's not good
cleaning,
math,
your
but yes.
lawn. Sorry?
Math's not your forte, but sure. 10 years. That'd be 10 years at that price tag.
Whatever. It's
Yeah.
worth it. If it does what they say it does, I'm getting one. I'm definitely getting one.
I mean, Elon's always over promises. Like he does eventually get to the original promises.
Yeah.
But like even self-driving cars are not where they need to be yet. Like they're getting better and better. But yeah, there's no doubt that he will eventually be able to do the things he says he does. Like in the history of Apple, I've rarely, if ever, bought the version 1 of anything because any new product they build, like the Apple Vision Pro, next one will probably be like a massive leap. So for me, I love seeing it just because I love that I'll be alive for part of this, right? I don't know if I'll be around for flying cars, but I'll get a bit of the Jetsons before my time's done.
On that note, a lot of the Jetsons happen in 2020.
Yeah.
Okay, but look at the commercial use of this. I see it being a huge commercial success for businesses if it works like it should, right? And again, I think you're right. The first version is you might be buying someone inside the suit and you're not aware of it. You never know.
Yeah.
But
That feels like a Saturday Night Live skit.
yeah, it does. You
Yeah.
might. I guess we'll see, but I got to give credit to Elon to the amount of innovation he's putting out there, no matter how we feel about him personally and what he posts and his political views. I think we have to disconnect that from the entrepreneur and the innovator Elon is and give him
He's
credit.
a visionary. There's
He
no doubt
is.
that he's a visionary. And he's got so much money. Like, there's nothing holding him back.
No,
Like,
well, look at buying
he's essentially trying
Twitter.
to be Tony Stark from the Marvel universe, where he can just think it and build it, and that's pretty cool. Because if you think about it, there's a lot of people out there who have an insane amount of wealth, but they're not doing the things that Elon's doing with his money.
And you know what? I think something that we have forgotten about or think it's been a massive failure is his acquisition of Twitter. And it has been. Initially, if you look at just financial metrics, I think he bought it for 44 billion, and I think the latest valuation on it was 9 billion. So he's lost basically $35 billion since the acquisition. But I do think X will be successful. I just don't know how, but I think we're underestimating what he's done with
I think X is total shit.
it.
Most people can't open X in public anymore. Like,
Fair enough. Fair enough.
yeah.
I
So
can't open the for you side to it because it's either going to be someone dying, like someone getting run over by a train the other day when I
right.
opened it. But I still like my own feed of the folks that I want to follow, especially when it comes to sports. I
Sure.
love following what's happening in the Montreal Canadian Twitter trends when the game is going on.
I
That's
agree. I
the
love
way I
that
use
part
it.
of it, but the rest of it, I just think that X is just, it's literally the bottom dwellers of the internet now. Yeah.
You
The
know what? I
bottom of the
tried
barrel.
spending more time on Treads, and that is like the opposite of X. It's so woke compared to X is like the anti woke. Is there somewhere in the middle? Facebook?
I don't know. Maybe Facebook's going to come full circle. I don't
Oh,
know.
yes.
I think, yeah.
No, Facebook has been taken over by the boomers, and I don't think they're going to give it back. Anyways,
That's
let's
you.
jump into the big topic. I want to talk about what is the path for HR people to get to the C suite. So I want to give you some background and some key stats of the educational background, what type of learnings, what type of roles they've done. And there's two different perspectives. This article that I'm looking at is in the US, but there's also a Canadian side of it. So
Mm.
if we look at it, many of the CHROs in Canada hold a bachelor degree in HR. I guess that makes sense, right? The other one is business administration or psychology. There is advanced degrees like an MBA or a master's in HR. And the other thing that most CHROs have had is they're certified human resource professionals. So they're CHPR. That's really common. But then we look at what does that career look like? And for most folks that I talk to in HR, I always advise that first role that you should do is a coordinator. An HR coordinator, a talent acquisition coordinator is a great way to learn the process, the system, the flows, understand the technology, know the day to day. I think it's a fantastic role. Then generally you'll see a couple of paths that they will go down. One of them is in the generalist side. So being an
Mhm.
HR generalist, being an HR business partner, so very attuned to all the aspects of HR. So you'll start seeing after a couple of years of doing generalist work, you'll specialize. So one of the specialization is talent acquisition as an example, total rewards, which is compensation, payroll. There's many different avenues that you can go. And this article points that generally the ones that become CHROs have come from a path of generalists through most of their career because they've touched every aspect, but not really specialize in anything. So Yves, before I dig in deeper, for new HR folks that are coming in and being like, I want to be a CEO, I want to be a CHRO, any advice for them? Like, where should they start?
That's a great question. I don't know where they start, but some of the things that you need to look out for as they're progressing in their career path. So, one, we talked about this before, is just go beyond the expectation of your role to understand the functions of the business as a whole. And I think show elements of leadership throughout your career. Even if you don't have anyone reporting to you, like you can literally show up as a leader in your organization. And I think, again, is have a curiosity and understanding of how the whole business works. But you can't go from generalist to C-suite as the next step.
Yeah.
Unless you're like a diamond in the rough. But eventually you learn skills at every step that you take along the way. And you mentioned that recruiting coordinator would be a great place to start.
Yeah.
Because it's the equivalent of a sales development rep in the world of sales. To get to the CSO is you get the full spectrum of everything that's tied to your role. and you get an understanding of how to navigate that and what you're excited, what you're motivated by, and the things that you feel really passionate about through that. Because you might not like every aspect of HR. But yeah, I'm not surprised that there's people that make it to the CEO level of these organizations that have started in HR, because you truly have to be a great leader is what you have
Yeah.
to. Yeah, unless it's like you're like me and you just inherited the role by default, but that's different. That's a different story.
Or you just start the business yourself, right?
Yeah,
That's a great
exactly.
way to
I didn't start
become a
off to be a
CEO.
CEO.
I'm glad you mentioned it because it was the first thing I was thinking as well. And when you see folks from HR being successful and having C-suite roles, obviously the CHRO is one, but there's no reason that you can't be a CEO or even a COO. Those folks have been very successful, have been able to understand every aspect of the business and understand how they make money and how HR can contribute to them making money and not be seen as a cost center. The ones that do that well in their HR careers, they get promoted. And folks want them on the C-suite because they have a deep understanding of the business and they understand the people side of it, which has become absolutely critical. And it's a differentiator in the marketplace right now. Like those companies that are really well equipped to work with their workforce and bring the leadership aspects usually do really well. One of the things that I was trying to figure out in researching this is for CHROs, there's not many that came from talent acquisition. And I think that is changing dramatically because CEOs see talent acquisition as the most critical part of HR. And I think that's changed in the last 5 years, or at least since the pandemic. Well, talking about HR folks that have become CEOs, not a lot of them. I had to do some research to find three. And I think the biggest one is Mary Barra, who's the CEO of General Motors. There's also Lena Nair, who's the CEO of Chanel, and Anne Mulcahy, who is former CEO of Xerox. The list is very short. So if you want to be a CEO, probably HR is not the best path to get there. I'm not saying it's impossible. It's possible, but I probably would not go down that road. If you want to be a CHRO, HR is probably a good place to start.
I'd be curious because I'm assuming their roles were not HR 100% of the time that they were in those organizations to get to there. Probably started in HR, but then had transferable skills that led them to leading other parts of the business.
Okay, I promise I'll get my research assistant to do that research for our next episode, and I'll update you at the start of the show of exactly that, Pat. So, Yves, it's been a busy week. What do you have coming up?
Honestly, quite a bit. We've been shifting a lot of things internally. We have 2 recent hires. We have another one that we're hiring for at the moment. So I don't want to say throw a grenade at things, but sometimes that's probably the best expression is just throw a grenade at something to essentially reset a little bit. But I feel like we're getting closer to where we want Career Beacon to be. It's starting to make more sense for us since the acquisition. A lot of it post-acquisition was untangling. Now it's rebuilding. So yeah, it's good right now.
Then that note, another fun episode of Beacon Bits. Au revoir.
Au revoir.